Hi guys, it's Professor Palumbo here, and I want to walk you through Chapter 5 Hands-On. This project is different because we're not going to be starting from scratch. We're going to be using an existing project, Chapter 4 Hands-On, and then just making some modifications to it. So we don't have to create a new project. I'm going to go out to my Chapter 4 Hands-On. I'm going to right-click on it, click Copy, and then I'm going to right-click and paste. Wait till it copies. Then I'm going to right-click and rename this to Chapter 5 Hands-On. Now, this is the only place where I can rename outside of Visual Studio, outside of Visual Basic. So I can rename this high-level folder, but once I go into this folder, I cannot rename anything in here because Visual Basic needs to know. So I'm just going to open it up with the old names and do the rest of my renaming from inside of Visual Basic. Okay, now in Solution Explorer, you see the name of your project still says Chapter 4 Hands-On, and you may or may not see your solution listed there. If you're not seeing your solution, you need to go into Tools, Options, and go to, where do we want to go? General? No, we want to go down to Projects and Solutions. There we go. And so scroll down to Projects and Solutions, click on that, and inside there, there's a checkbox that says Always Show Solution. Make sure that that has a check mark. Click OK. That's going to enable you to see your solution listed up here. So we can right-click on that solution name and click Rename, and we can replace the 4 with a 5. So we're Chapter 5 Hands-On is in our solution name now. And then for our project name, we can right-click on Chapter 4 Hands-On, rename, and change that to Chapter 5 Hands-On. Now, the last place that you can do some renaming is inside the properties of your project, which are located in the My Project object that you see here in Solution Explorer. So I'm going to double-click My Project. It opens up the properties for this project. And I'm going to come in here and there's a couple places I can do some renaming. Now make sure that you are in the very first tab up at the top on the left that says Application. And then where it says Assembly Name, I can change that to Chapter 5. And where it says Root Namespace, I can change that to Chapter 5. And that's as far as I can go with modifying the properties. Now, it's okay if some of you're going to see when you get out and you save this, that some of the file names still say Chapter 4. Don't worry about that. To rename the rest of the files, it's kind of complex and I didn't want to go into it here. But there is a way to rename those. I'm just not going to talk about it at this point. So don't worry if some of your file names still say Chapter 4 Hands-On. Okay, now what we're going to be doing in Chapter 5 Hands-On is we're going to be adding menus, and we're going to be getting rid of this New Order button, this Summary button, and this Exit button. So in your Toolbox toolbar, you need to scroll down to the section called Menus and Toolbars. And in there, you'll see an object called a menu strip. I'm going to drag and drop that menu strip anywhere into my form. It doesn't matter where I put it. It's going to create a component down in the component tray called Menu Strip 1. And up here, you're going to see a little menu in the upper left corner, and it's going to say Type Here. I'm going to click once there, and I'm going to type in ampersand file. Now, it's going to show you the menus that you need to include on page 235 in your book. Now we want to have an underlined letter so that we can use our keyboard access, Alt and the letter, instead of having to use our mouse. So the ampersand in front of the F is to give the underlined letter. Now underneath my file menu, I'm going to have New Order. So I want to click here where it says Type Here. I'm going to type in ampersand new space order. Below that, I'm going to have summary, so I'm typing ampersand summary. And then below that, I want the word exit, and I want to underline the X, so I'm going to type in capital E ampersand XIT. There we go. Now, next door to the File menu is the Edit menu, so I'm going to click to the right of File, type in ampersand Edit. Then below that, I'm going to have ampersand Calculate Selection. Below that, now because I already have a C, I can't have C, I'm doing clear, but I can't underline the C, so I'm going to underline my I for item, clear item. And then I'm going to create ampersand font, whoops, capital F, and ampersand, whoop, come on, and then C ampersand OLOR for color because I've already got a C. Then next door to edit, I'm going to do ampersand help. And below that, I have ampersand about. Now these menus are going to take the place of, in my file menu, this new order option is going to take the place of the button. Summary, this is going to take the place of the summary button, and it's going to take the place of the exit button. In the edit menu, I have calculate and clear. However, I'm still going to keep my calculate button and my clear button. So I'm going to have two ways of doing calculate and clear, the menu or the buttons. Help about is something new that we've added, and that's just going to give us some information about the project. We're just going to create a little message box there to create some information about the project. Now, let's go into our code. I'm going to click File, and I'm going to double click New Order. This is going to open up code for my menu option. There it is right here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the code that used to be in my button and put it down there. So I'm going to go up to my new order button, and I'm going to select everything out of there except for the name of the sub and the end sub. And I'm going to Control X to cut it. Now, I can totally delete this button because I'm not using that code anymore. And I'm going to go down to my new order menu and paste all the code in. All right, now, there we go. Now, because we don't have a new order button anymore, I'm going to have to change where it says new order button here. I'm going to change it to my new order tool strip menu item. There we go. So anywhere that's referencing the button, we have to change it to the menu item now. Okay, we're going to do the same thing. Let me go back. We're going to do the same thing for summary. Let me double click summary. And there's my new summary procedure. I'm going to go up and locate it. Here it is. And I'm going to select all the code in there. Cut it. All right, I can now delete my summary button procedure. And I'm going to scroll down and paste that code into my summary menu. Notice here again it's referencing the new order button click procedure. We've got to change that to the new order tool strip menu item click because we no longer have the button. Okay, that looks pretty good. And then the last one is the exit. I'm going to double click exit, just type in me.close, and now I'm going to come up here and delete my exit button procedure. Now I can go out here and totally just delete these buttons. Delete new order, delete summary, and delete exit. I'm not going to have those anymore. Now, with the calculate button and the clear button and having a menu option for those, I'm going to do things a little differently because I am keeping the buttons. So let me double click on my calculate button and come into that procedure. Now, I don't want to write the same exact code for my menu I already have written for my button. So there's an easy way of adding the menu so that it points to this code that's already been written. I'm going to go to my handles clause right here. I'm going to put a comma, and then I'm going to put in the calculate selection tool strip menu item dot click. Now what that's going to do is that's going to say I want this code, my calculate button code, to also get executed when this menu item is clicked. I need to do the same thing for my clear. So let me roll down to my clear. In the handles clause, I'm going to put a comma, and then I'm going to put clear item tool strip menu item dot click. And now that menu item will execute the clear button code as well. Let's test that out. If I come back to my form, you always need to test everything that you did. I'm going to hit start. Oh, what are my build errors? Oh, I must have some errors. Oh, I've got an option somewhere that says new order button. Let me double click that. I've got to make sure that I replace that everywhere. So I want to put new tool strip item there instead. All right, new order tool strip menu item is now there. And let me try running it again. So you want to test this out and make sure that your buttons and your menu items are both doing the same thing. So when my form comes up, I'm going to do a calculation using my button, and that works fine. I'm going to clear that out using the button, and that works fine. Now I'm going to do 5 lattes. This time I'm going to use my menu, calculate, looks good. And now I'm going to use my edit clear, looks good. Okay, so you want to test and make sure that your buttons are working. Now let me test my new order menu, looking good. And I'm going to test my summary option, looks great, and file exit. Okay, now the other thing that we need to do in chapter 4 is 2 things. We're adding the ability to modify font and color. So in our edit menu, we have a font option and a color option, and you can find the code for these in the book on page 241 and 242. But the one thing that I want to mention about the code that we're going to be adding here is in order for this code to work, we need to come down into our toolbox toolbar and add a couple of dialogue. What a dialogue is a preformed window that Windows provides for us. So when we go in and we want to change the font or we want to change a color, Windows has windows or dialogues already pre-programmed to do that. And we're going to take advantage of that. So I'm going to go down to my dialog section in my toolbox toolbar, and I'm going to drag in the color dialog down into my component tray, and I'm going to drag in the font dialog down into my component tray. Now when I write the code for my font option and my color option that you see in your book, you're not going to get any blue squiggles. It's going to know that you have a font dialog and a color dialog box there. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about is in this chapter, we start using something called a function. If I go into my code window, I'm going to have to code the function manually. So I'm going to come down here after my last procedure, and you'll see the code for this function at the bottom of page 239. So I'm going to type it in, private function, and I'm calling my function find tax. And then I have a parameter that I'm passing in by val, means by value. And I have to pass in an amount. I'm calling it amount decimal. And that parameter that I'm passing in is a decimal, so I say as decimal. Then a function is a procedure that returns a value. So I've got to tell it what is the data type of the number that I'm returning. What's going to happen in this function is that we are going to pass in an amount and we're going to pass out the taxes for that amount. So the amount of the drinks that we're purchasing is going to be calculated and then returned here. So I'm going to type in return the amount decimal, which is the number being passed in, times my constant, the tax rate decimal. Okay, and then that's all I have to do to create my function. Now I'm going to use my function up in the calculate procedure where I'm calculating my tax. So I'm going to scroll back up to my calculate procedure, and you'll see on page 239 also that here where it says if the tax checkbox is checked, then we're going to calculate the tax. Now instead of calculating the tax here, we're going to call our function. So we're going to say tax decimal equals the find tax function, and we're passing in the subtotal decimal. There we go. And now, instead of doing the calculation, it's going to call the function. The function's going to do the calculation using this amount being passed in and return the amount of the tax into the tax decimal field. So make sure you're making that change. I think that's pretty much it for the chapter 5. Make sure you're saving, doing a file save all. Oh, I remember one last thing I wanted to mention to you guys, that when you do the color option, for some reason, the color option will not allow us to change the colors. We're going to be changing the font and the colors of these 3 text boxes, but the color won't work if your text box is designated as read only. So you need to go to these 3 text boxes and change the read only property to false for all 3 of these. That way the color will work It's just a little glitch. I don't know. The font works, but the color doesn't. Okay, so make that change. And that's it for today. I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.